I'd like to welcome the new interns that Linda brought. Thank y'all for coming. You won't get to do this very often. I'm glad you're here now. And thank all of y'all for coming. So we work at a university where we invite people in, we sort of train them up for the future, and we send them on their way. Transitions. So we're used to seeing learners come and go. It's in our nature. It's in the nature of a university. And it's not just students and residents and fellows and postdocs. That's also true of faculty, PRAs, staff. They come in, they serve, they learn, and they go. It's probably on a slightly different time schedule for our faculty and staff and PRAs, but the same phenomenon occurs. So a department is kind of like a chassis that holds, it enables all of this. It holds our efforts. It enables and it focuses our best dreams and our aspirations and our efforts, and it endures beyond us. It changes more slowly. It's much more stable. It outlives us in a sense. So the department stays, the people move through it. So it's in the nature of a department in a university to have people move through it. Transitions are a normal part of that. So I'm going to tell you about a transition in the next few minutes. Here comes one for you. I am 70 years old. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been chairing this department for 20 years. The average lifespan of a department chair in a university medical school is 8 years. And while I still love this work with all my heart, and I can still find my way to work, find my way to my office, and I still remember Jesse's name, and I still remember the password to my email account, 20 years is long enough. So I think we would definitely benefit at this point from someone fresher and faster and smarter leading us to the future. So I've actually been planning, thinking about my own transition out of this department, out of the position of chair of this department for about the last 5 years. And I've also been, I've got that coupled with some other leadership transitions that are occurring and that will occur in the department, and thinking about how to ensure that thing that I just described, a stable chassis that can hold that can harness and focus us, that can hold our dreams, that can actually make use of our best work, how to hold that stable through a transition like this. Whether I care to dwell on it or not, the transition of a department's chair from one to another is a relatively big deal. And I thought it was high time for me to talk with y'all about that a little bit. So I'd like to do 3 things for the next 45 minutes or so. Number 1, I want to talk about what the timeline for this looks like. Number 2, I'd like to talk about the process, how this transition actually occurs in this place. And number 3, and maybe most important, I'd like to talk with you about what a chair does. Why does a department need a chair? Maybe a department doesn't need a chair. You know, what I do for a living, and therefore, what kind of person might make sense as my successor? Not necessarily to do what I do, but to understand the range of variation and the way this job can be done. So I want to just kind of open this position up to you, which is mostly a closed position. Even the people that I work with most closely don't know a lot about what I do. Probably the only person who knows very much about what I do is Larry Green, because he did it right before I did. And he doesn't even know because the job's changed so much in the last 20 years. And he stays out of it. So I think it will improve the prospects for my successor if you know what the contours of the job are, and it'll improve the quality of the department itself if you understand a little bit more fully what the job of the chair does here. So let me start with timing. Timing really matters, and And I've sort of been waiting for a certain particular thing to happen, which has happened. Nearly all of the first tier departments of family medicine in the nation have recently hired new chairs. So the national pool is refilling now. For a while there was this crazy scramble. It's still going on a little bit. I'm getting calls every week from search firms and from other departments asking for candidates for the chair of their department. All of that madness has quieted down a little bit. So the timing is good for our institution to take better advantage of what's percolating out there nationally. Dean Riley always has several searches going on at any given time. I'll discuss with him the timing down to the month so that he can encumber funds for a recruitment package and so he can manage this search without distraction. I expect this process can be concluded in 2 years. Sounds like a long time, but it's really not. I'm prepared to be flexible about the timing since I still have plenty of gas in my tank and I don't need to be anywhere else. So we can afford a lot of discretion here. But let me describe how the process itself goes and you'll see why some flexibility might matter. The chairs of all departments serve at the pleasure of the Dean of the College of Medicine, who has sole hiring authority and responsibility for this position. I work for the Dean. Seems like I work for you guys. That's what I try to make it feel like all the time, and it does. But the Dean hires me, and I only sit in this chair at his pleasure. This position will almost certainly involve a national or an international search. Internal candidates will be invited and will be welcome to compete for this position, but this will definitely not be hiring from within automatically. That could happen, and it does. It happens here and it happens in many other places. But there's likely to be a national or an international pool of candidates looking at this position. What the Dean will do, he'll select a search committee, and he will select a chair of that search committee and charge that committee to find and present to him 2 or 3 or 5, probably 3, some small number of candidates who meet his specified criteria, which he will charge the committee with at the time that that search is initiated. He'll tell them what he's looking for in a chair of family medicine. Before you start getting all restless about you're not having anything to do with this, the search committee may include a family physician. It probably will, but it almost surely won't include a member of our regular faculty. We will not be invited to hire the person that we work for. And when I say it like that, you should easily be able to understand why. However, the dean will generally offer multiple opportunities for members of the department to suggest candidates, to offer opinions about the position, to offer opinions about specific candidates, and to offer opinions about the overall process. As the search proceeds, department members will be involved in interviewing and evaluating all of the candidates. If this is important or interesting to you, make sure you raise your hand, pop your head up out of the foxhole, because it's not that hard to become invited to participate in a search like this. Once that happens, once a committee has been essentially charged, it usually takes about a year to find somebody. That's about the usual time course that it takes to conduct a search of this sort. Now, I'm willing to stay in this position until a permanent chair is in place, but Dean Riley may prefer an interim chair instead. I'm leaving that entirely up to his discretion. Most likely, he'll ask me to stay in the position until then. But if there's some particular reason that he thinks the interests of the department would be better served, then we would have an interim chair. A selection of an interim chair is likewise entirely up to the dean and not us. We're also equally welcome to make suggestions, but he won't take them. After a new chair is hired, I may remain in this department as a regular faculty member, part-time or full-time, purely at the pleasure of the new chair. That will not be my decision, and it won't be the dean's decision. That's a decision of the chair. The chair of this department has ultimate hiring and releasing authority for everybody who's a member of the department. And so that's a decision that a new chair would make, and it will depend on more than whether he likes me or is threatened by me. It'll also depend on how the budgets are running, what kinds of programs are going on, and other kinds of things that emerge. So that's not the kind of thing that one needs to take too personally. Now for the heart of this. What does a chair do? What do I do? You know, it's easy to find job descriptions. You can Google Department of Family Medicine chair job description, and 15, 20 job descriptions will pop up from various departments of family medicine around the country, including this one. I actually have a job description somewhere. I've helped numerous other departments develop their own, and we will have a revised one for my successor. And those are useful. I actually reviewed 15 job descriptions while I was thinking about talking with y'all about this, just to make sure I hadn't forgotten what they say. And they matter. They tell you some things about what I'm responsible for: overall direction of the department, finances and budget, recruitment of faculty, strategic planning, building programs, blah, 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 all the stuff that you sort of see on a job description. But that doesn't tell you very much about what I actually do, what I think about. When I burn calories trying to think about how to do this job well, it is not in the job description. That tells you the general direction that I'm looking in, but it doesn't tell you how one leads a department of family medicine. So I want to try to open that up a little bit for you here. I have to say, I actually thought this was going to be kind of easy and kind of fun, and I made the mistake of taking a week of vacation just last week, just before this, and I had to ruin a couple of days of it trying to wrestle my thoughts to the page, because this isn't easy. As it turns out, the best work that I do, the best work that I do for this department involves thinking in a way that's somewhat abstract, that's somewhat in the future, that is somewhat in terms of probabilities, that is somewhat at odds with the actual programs that are going on the ground here, and how to describe that, how to make that as a sensible enterprise for you, has turned out to surprise me at how elusive it is to describe that. So what I decided to do was just give you 4 principles that I use in thinking about how one functions as a high-end, outstanding chair of a department of family medicine. The principles that I live by, and some of these will be completely familiar to me because it comes out of my mouth all the time. And then I'm going to just run a list of about maybe 5 things about how I fill my days, what I think about, and how it plays out. Try to keep it simple. It's a very incomplete list, but I figure you'll fill the incompleteness with questions of your own. So here are the principles. Number 1, even though this is about a single actor, even though I'm sitting up here talking about the job of the department chair, you have to understand that the business of leading this or any other department is a group effort, that many people in the department are engaged in leading it. It's a team effort. And I don't just come up with ideas and then other people do them. It doesn't work like that at all. It doesn't work like that at all. Particularly when we pass a threshold of a certain size, many of the leaders in our department function within their domain exactly as I do in terms of leading a department as a whole by taking responsibility for the shape and direction of their program or their mission area, by hiring, by managing the budgets. All of that stuff is managed by a team of leaders that actually drives all the way down to the ground. And so it's both reassuring, and it should be reassuring for you in terms of your sense of stability. If I disappear from here today, abruptly, without warning, this department will continue to run just fine for a long time. You wouldn't notice for a long time, unless you had a meeting with me next week and you got a blank spot on your calendar. But basically the operation, once things get imagined and wrestled to the ground and put in place and put in motion, that flywheel keeps turning. And so it doesn't depend on me. It's interesting, and I was very uncomfortable 20 years ago sitting in front of this room. I don't want to do that. My daddy taught me not to do that. Stay in the back, stay below, lead from behind. But it turns out that you need that. And it took me a long time to realize that you need to know what I think and what I do. And it doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with you. So I'm first telling you that this is a team effort. This is a department that has a lot of leaders in it, and they matter. Second thing to understand right off the bat is that this is a middle management job. It might seem like to some of you that it's kind of like the top of the pyramid, chair of the department. The chair of one department among many in this school that consists of a school of medicine, a school of public health, a school of pharmacy, a school of nursing, a school of dentistry, a graduate school, 2 hospitals. There are people who run all of those things, and we are part of their system. So they don't think about me as at the top of any kind of pyramid whatsoever, unless they need a quick way for me to get a message or a decision that involves all of this to them. But I am looking up at a large, multi-specialty, ramified, complicated healthcare system that we are just a small part of. And so it's useful to know that we're not an autonomous department. And it is also useful to know that as a principal, I can only do my job well if I take the time and the trouble to learn who they are, who those people are, how they work, what resources they command, what they value, how they go about doing their job, and figure out a way to further our mission in such a way that it also furthers their mission at the same time. So I often say, they want to help us, they just don't know it yet. It's not a matter of us deciding what we want to do and doing it. It's a matter of us deciding what we want to do, shaping that to the overall, and figuring out a way to message it and compromise it and otherwise deal with it so that both of us advance. That's a way to win resources that we don't otherwise have, and win partners, and win programs, win our future. Third thing I'd say is, this is really important. We're members of a service profession. We're here to serve. The health professions are service professions. And so I think a lot about service, and I think a lot about professionalism. It has everything to do with the tone and the color and the priorities about how I lead. You probably know something about servant leadership. Robert Greenleaf wrote a book 45 years ago. I think it was called Servant Leadership. There's another kind of a leadership mode or a leadership style, give and take, a guy named Adam Grant pushes that It's a very important way to think about how to lead. In my view, it's an irreducible element of effective leadership in any service profession. If we're here to serve, I'm here to serve. Not only do I need to model that, not only do I think that we as primary care clinicians, as family docs and other primary care clinicians, at our best serve, but it's also the most effective way to lead in the service of you. Helping you realize your full potential creates a much more potent workforce than leading from in front of the parade. Now, the professional part of this is also important. We're in a service profession. A professional is a member of a community of people who have special knowledge and skills, and they're granted special privileges because of that. They're dedicated to doing good and operating under a covenant and pledged to good behavior to preserve and protect that covenant. It's a covenant between ourselves and our patients. It's a covenant between me and you. I have a fiduciary responsibility to your well-being and your welfare as a professional. So I think a lot about professionalism and how we behave professionally as an irreducible element of how we lead. So I don't think that part of what I'm saying is any different than how you learn to take care of patients. There are certain values that are inherent in what I just said. Humility, respect, generosity, integrity, impeccable integrity, discipline, competence. You can't be lazy about this. You can't not know things that can be known. Kindness, courage. Think about those things. This is what I hope for and I'm proud to see you become. And this is how I feel like I must behave in order to lead you. Okay, and the last thing, and probably the noisiest for those people who watch how I operate, is the last principle is that we operate in a complex adaptive system. You guys are sick of hearing me talk about complex adaptive systems. But you might as well go ahead and swallow your bile and not get sick, because I'm never going to let up on this. We live and work in a complex adaptive system, and trying to understand the rules, the operating principles of complex adaptive systems and how to lead within it is really important. It has incredibly important implications, like understanding that change is never ending. Change is a state of affairs. Things aren't events, they're processes. You don't ever do something and be done with it. Adaptability is the key to our life. It's our very life. Continuous change is our very life. Our work life is a beta version of our work life. Like, some things are not just unknown, but some things are unknowable. We're walking into the future with a baked-in level of uncertainty. There's some things that we cannot know. You can't go read about it, or you can't have experience that helps you know what's going to come out of left field. We have to anticipate surprises. That's inherent in a complex adaptive system. You sometimes just have to try stuff and see what happens. That's the smartest and wisest approach. And that means that you're going to fail, because there's nothing to go by. So you have to get used to failure. This is really hard for us high achievers who got here by giving the right answers a lot of the time, to learn that not knowing the answer, that not being an answer, and trying things that won't work and will be wrong is a proper approach. That's inherent in complex adaptive systems. We have to fail a lot in order to succeed. Okay, enough of that background. Let me just get you into what I do every day. Why is my calendar so pink? Why is 40 hours a week in meetings and doing stuff that involve being with other people? What do I do in all of that time? So here's what I think are some of the most important things that I do as the chair of this department. Number one, speak the vision. point to the pole star. This is the direction that we're headed. Number 2, learn to see far into the distance in all directions, but especially into the future. Cultivate a disciplined competence at seeing far into the future. It really matters a lot. And I'll describe in a little bit more detail in a moment each of these, including what you see when you look into the future. You don't see the future. Number 3, hire the right people. Give them what they need to succeed and get out of their way. Lucky for me, my demons don't run along the lines of control and credit and holding on to. Because if they did, I would be fighting that demon on an hourly basis. It is impossible to be a good leader in a complex adaptive system and in a department like this if you don't get out of the way of good people and let them do things that you didn't think of, that you don't think is right, that isn't what anybody expected, that often turn out to be a lot better than the way it would have worked out. Number 4, shape the culture. Shaping the culture is a very big deal, and there are a lot of ways to do it. I'm going to have to abbreviate that. I'll telegraph a few messages about that. Number 5 is to pass it on, to take responsibility for the professional development of those who are coming in. We pass people through the system. Make sure that they learn what there is that's useful to learn along the way. Mentor. It's incredibly important and it's incredibly rewarding. Right now, it's the most rewarding thing that I do. People show up, people who, well, I'll get to that. It's just great. Then there's a lot of other stuff, certain kinds of meetings and certain kinds of planning I'm not going to talk very much about, but you can ask questions about it if you care. So let me do these one at a time. Number 1, speaking the vision. How does that work? Pointing to the pole star. We have a direction. We're actually trying to move toward a goal. We have a pole star. We have a true north. My job as the department chair is to foster agreement about what that direction is, preferably because we formulate it together. We all participate in the formulation of that direction. And to know it and to say it over and over and over and over again until everybody here can say it. In my case, those of you who pass me in the hall or otherwise know me, hear me say a lot of the time, I'm just here to help people be a little healthier. I'm just trying to help people get a little healthier. I say that all the time. That is my North Star. That's my true north. That's the service in which I work. I'm just trying to help people be healthier. So every single thing we do here must be measured against that. And I pay very careful attention to all of your individual efforts, those of you whose sphere I interact with, and the direction of our programs to ensure that it comports to that. Most of the time by now, I never have to say anything because we've all more or less drunk the Kool-Aid and our programs come out of the shell looking in that direction, imprinted for helping people be a little healthier. Let me say a little bit more about it because there are millions of ways to help people be healthier. There are an infinite number of ways you can help people be healthier to retain fidelity, that pole star. But we have to stay faithful to it, and we've got to do that in the context of a university. We work in a university that sees patients, that renders care. So that means we practice, that prepares a certain important subset of the workforce, the primary care workforce. That means we educate and we train, and that discovers and learns and looks for better and better ways to do that practice. We research. So within those mission areas, we are trying to help people be a little bit healthier. We're trying to prepare people for that. We're trying to learn better ways to do that. So that we're constrained by those things, but it still leaves us an almost infinite number of options about what we do here. Now, if you look around at all of the stuff that's going on in this department, it might not look the same to you as it does to me, but here's what I see. I think it's an incredibly coherent and yet diverse department. People are doing all kinds of stuff here, but it all adds up. In my view, as I look at it, as I look at all our programs, as I look at all of our efforts, they look to me like we're all pretty much pulling in the same direction. And I think I know why. So as I keep my eye on that and make sure that no matter what we take on, we're progressing toward it, we've actually reached some agreement about what's in mission and what's out of mission for us. And the easiest way for me to think about that, how do we decide which ways for helping people become a little healthier for us and which aren't? For the last 25 years, I've gone by the 1994 Institute of Medicine definition of primary care. It's a definition of primary care that describes certain features of primary care that, if they're there, primary care is more effective. It causes people to be healthier. So if we do things that comport with this particular definition of primary care, we're in mission. Primary care is the provision of integrated, accessible healthcare services by clinicians, personal relationship, who are accountable for addressing a large majority of personal health care needs, comprehensiveness, developing a sustained partnership with patients over time, continuity, incrementalism. Come back and we'll see how you're doing. Practicing in the context of family and community. So it's all right there. I think close to 100% of what we're doing here lines up with that. These are all things that if we do them well, people will be healthier. If we're working on improving access, that's in mission. If we're working on the personal clinical relationship, studying or becoming expert at understanding or using the value of a personal relationship, that's in mission. If it's attending to comprehensiveness, that's in. Practicing in the context of family and community, in. If it's any of the common problems that occur among these majority of personal health care needs, that's in mission. If we're looking at problems with diabetes or depression, that's in. If it has to do with testing a new medication for refractory schizophrenia, and that's probably somebody else's fire to tend. That's out of mission for us. So one of my jobs is to make sure everybody's on the same bus, to make sure that we've all been magnetized to true north, that we're all pulling in the same direction. Family medicine, primary care, we don't operate with much of a margin. We can't afford to flop around. We actually have to be disciplined in how we work together and how we add up to something more than we are as individuals. And I spend a lot of my observational energy just making sure that's happening. And it is. And the people who are attracted to those features of health and healthcare are attracted to us, and they come here almost without effort. So number 2, learn to see far into the distance in all directions. This is where I really got bogged down trying to tell you what I do. This is actually a place where I have a certain amount of conflict with other leaders in the department because we're sometimes we're using different scales in terms of time or in terms of distance. I'll try to describe what I mean. The farther ahead you can see, the better you can be at threading the best path to our city on the hill. If I know that practicing in the context of family and community is one of the sure things that we must do in order to be effective, in order to help people be healthier, and I see that we're not doing that, and I see things that are in the way of our doing that, one of my jobs is to figure out how to practice in the context of family and community, in the face of barriers, moving barriers, in the face of competing priorities. We've basically all got day jobs. We're all trying to do stuff. We don't have time for that stuff. And yet, if we don't move in that direction, we sink to mediocrity. So, trying to see what hasn't even yet come up over the horizon is something I didn't know how to do very well when I got here 20 years ago. And I didn't think I had an aptitude for it, but it turns out this is something you can learn. It's possible to learn to see into the future, to even see what hasn't yet come up over the horizon by tuning your distance vision, by anticipating. And something really funny happens when you start trying to do that, because you move out of the world of certainties into the world of probabilities. You move out of the world of things that are as they seem into the world of things that aren't as they seem when I get closer. I'll give you an example. When you see from a great distance, so when you're flying in from the east to Denver, you can see where the plains stop and the mountains start. There's a demarcation there. You can go, whoa, Front Range right there. Sharp as it can be. But when you're on the ground here, it's hard to tell where the plains stop and the mountains start. The transition is blurry when you're close. Or imagine that you're high in the mountains and there's a cloud cover below you and it's flat. It looks like the ground, but it's the top of the clouds, sharp and clear as it can be, flat as the horizon. You've seen that before. When you descend down into that, as you get closer to it, it begins to get fuzzy. It's not sharp. And then you're in the fog. It's foggy. It's fog. It doesn't look clear at all. From a distance, things that are in truth clearly different from one another show up clearly. When you're close, trying to manage a program, trying to figure out how to staff Thursday afternoon, those kinds of things aren't clear at all. There's a lot of noise and it's hard to see. So there's another kind of expanded vision that comes into play here. It's not just out into the future, but it's up into the structure of our systems. I mentioned this just a moment ago. When I first got here, I spent almost a year meeting every dean in the dean's office, all the chancellors, the vice chancellors, all the leaders in our practice plan, all the hospital leaders, so I would know who they were and what they did and what they were good for, getting the lay of the land. That's context. That's a different kind of distant vision. Pulling on that stuff, that year of investment in meetings for people who I didn't work with on a daily basis, to this day continues to pay off. Sometimes there's a piece out there that's not in our department or not even in our school that we need in order to complete something. And I know about it because I took the trouble to see the distant context. Really valuable, really important, really my job. There are other kinds of expanded vision that I'm not going to talk about now, lateral vision, fellow chairs, and stuff like that. I want to give you a couple of examples of what this business of trying to see farther into the future and farther out from where we sit today, how it plays out. I'm going to try to give you two examples. One of them is something that has come to pass, and another one is something that we're right in the middle of right now. So first one I want to talk about is rural health. In 2001, I was having breakfast with Lloyd Michener, who was then the chair of the Department of Family Medicine at Duke, and Dick Krugman, my boss, the dean. And Lloyd, I was kicking him under the table. Lloyd was saying, Dick, what do you want Frank to do for you? Oh, damn, Lloyd, ask him what he can do for me. What do you want Frank to do for you? And without even thinking, Dick said rural health. At the time, the university was not doing very much at all about rural health. In fact, Dick would say, Colorado, the University of Colorado does not mean Colorado Boulevard. We've got to do something about the state. The AHEC program was directed by someone in another school. The majority of the rural clinicians regarded us as arrogant and inaccessible. They didn't use us for anything. We had difficulty finding and keeping community preceptors. The legislature was pissed at us for doing so little for the state. So this was Dick's problem. This wasn't my idea. This was my boss's idea. So it's not incumbent on me to come up with the ideas. Dick was saying, this is my problem here. This looks like something that might be in your mission area. So do a quick check. Is this in our mission area? You damn right. This is right in our mission area. So I and we agreed to do something about this. We laid out a few programs that could fit under the rural health umbrella and started, set out to do them to see if maybe we could put rural health on the map a little bit, thinking that it'd probably take 5 or 10 years to develop a comprehensive rural health program. So at the time, Jack Westphal had the High Plains Research Network. It was rural and it was running. It was pretty good by then. It was young, but it was actually in operation. So we had a small and fairly isolated rural practice-based research network that had grafted for its wisdom onto other PBRN experience that we had here. So we had that, and he didn't need much, but we just had to make sure that he had what he needed to keep going and producing answers. So Dick agreed to search for a new chair of the AHEC program, and he appointed me as the chair of the search committee for a new chair of the AHEC program, and lo and behold, we found somebody in family medicine to chair the AHEC program. That wouldn't have happened if it had only been my idea. Dick made that happen, but he made that happen through the agency of us because it comported with both of our missions. He had the authority, and we had the harmony for that. So the AHEC program moved into the School of Medicine. And this really interesting thing happened a couple of years after that. The school went through a curriculum revision. And among the areas that we were trying to consider revising were producing tracks within the school. And Dick asked me to raise the idea of a rural track. This was before we actually started having retreats and so forth. A rural track put me in charge of a certain part of the curriculum where that could be tested as a trial balloon. Maybe we need a rural track and a scholars track and some other kinds of tracks in the school. And there was actually quite a bit of faculty resistance from other parts of the School of Medicine to this idea. Rural track didn't sound like us as a school. Dick Krugman said, there's going to be a rural track. And he funded it. That happened. And so now there's a couple of pieces in place. And if we're thinking about a rural program, we've got a track, we've got a research network. Some pieces are coming together. Are there other things that we might need to either do or invest in? So Larry Green and I went out to the A.F. Williams Family Foundation and we asked them for $2 million to endow a chair in the dean's office, not in the Department of Family Medicine, in the dean's office for a dean, associate dean for rural health, which they agreed to do and which exists to this day. Mark Deutschman is the incumbent. He is the Patrick and Kathleen Thompson Chair for Rural Health for the School of Medicine. That institutionalized rural health as a school priority. There's always going to be some support for rural health in this medical school, forever, so long as endowments exist, I guess. And we failed on a couple of things. We were hoping at the time, you might remember this, Mark, I don't remember if you were part of this conversation back then or not. We were trying to create a tight pipeline between a rural track and residency programs that would offer rural training so that we weren't losing people in the rural track to other places. And we didn't exactly succeed at doing that. That didn't work. That was one of the things that was part of a dream or a vision for creating a rural track. Did not happen. But we did succeed at eventually succeeded at developing a rural residency track in Fort Morgan, and that was in part due to lobbying the legislature, who weren't very happy with us for the longest time about the need to underwrite the cost of developing a rural track. And they did, and they're happy about that. And so the short story here is we now have a program consisting of somewhat haphazard but somewhat coherent elements of rural training that is pretty damn good when taken as a whole. This medical school offers the opportunity to learn how to help people be a little healthier if they live in rural settings. with a collection of programs that when I was looking at this in 2001, these aren't the programs I was seeing. This isn't specifically what we were trying for, but this is generally what we were trying for. And as ways opened up, as pieces appeared, as things didn't work and fell away, it took shape. But it required constant attention to those pieces that might be useful, that needed to be woven into a coherent program. I have to do that. Make it add up at the end of the day to a coherent program. I don't run the thing. In fact, my name's not on any of that stuff. There are people who run it in ways that I don't know how. And they have their own ideas about how that should look and what it should be. They have their own dissatisfactions with what's not there. All of that is part of the continuous movement and unpredictable changes in this program. But my responsibility is to shepherd that in a general direction. I want to give you another quick example of looking in the distance that's a little bit more in the middle of where we are. Our effectiveness as primary care, this is about community and population health. So we know that if primary care is practiced in the context of family and community, we know that if we are sensitive to and partnered with community resources around health, that we'll be better at what we are. And the people we're trying to serve will be healthier. We know that. The data is unimpeachable. But it's really hard to do that as clinicians who practice in a building, in a practice, in an office. There's a lot of things about practicing in the context of family and community that are difficult. So how do we go about winning that piece of value for primary care? Okay. So we know that the social determinants of health matter. They matter even more than high-quality clinical care. And so we figure, I and a few Confederates figured that it would probably take 20 or 25 years for a department like this with imaginative risk-taking people to actually produce something solidly community. So we started out doing a few things. When we moved, we made a decision to move the university residency practice, which was on Leachdale. It was a terrible practice. It was, architecturally, it was wrong. It smelled bad. It was a shithole. And it was far away from our hospital. And we knew we needed to move that. And we made a decision at the time to move that clinic into an emerging new built community that was just being built, Stapleton, adjacent to this campus. And we staked out a claim to the neighborhoods around that community as our neighborhoods. This is our community. We're going to be embedded in this community. We're going to take responsibility for the health of this community. Oh, we had plans. Now, a lot of that stuff didn't work out immediately, but some of it really did. One of the things we did was we started an organization. The Stapleton build-out had a bunch of interesting features, one of which was they have a foundation. The Stapleton Foundation gets its money from the sale of real estate in Stapleton. So they have a continuous stream of revenue that they use as a foundation to accomplish what was then their three missions: education, self-sustainability, and integration with the surrounding neighborhoods. We persuaded them to add a fourth element of their mission, and it was health. And we used the Stapleton Foundation as a basis for developing something that we then called the Stapleton 2040. Stapleton 2040, we now call it 2040 Partners for Health. We developed it, it's 2040. What is that? That's not a visual acuity. That's how many years we thought it would be before we knew whether we were doing any good or not. We developed a program based on Stapleton Foundation dollars devoted to the health of the communities in and around our clinic. Since that time, a million things have happened, and it doesn't look like that anymore, but that was a seed of an original vision for developing community health. We wrote a report for the chancellor of the campus as we were moving to this campus, that we are building a beautiful campus in a very underserved neighborhood, and we need to be good neighbors, and we need to make a partnership with the community here. And we got agreement from the chancellor and the CEOs of the hospitals and the schools to create a community campus partnership for health that they invested in. That's still going on. It looks beautiful. It's gone in a completely different direction than we originally envisioned, but it's firing on all cylinders and it's doing some good. That's another piece that's there. We took the preventive medicine and the occupational medicine residency programs that the School of Public Health was having trouble administering. We took them administratively into the department, and we're staffing them. And we did that because public health and family medicine need to be more tightly bound together. And I think there's a preventive medicine residency that's in the Department of Family Medicine, and we say we do prevention. We're a little short on what we do for prevention, and there's a preventive medicine residency program in our department. One of these days, we need to get to really pulling these together and learning well from each other about prevention from a community and public health perspective. We did that at some cost to ourselves. In fact, if you just look at our budgets year over year, you go, why are you doing that? Why are we investing in School of Public Health residency programs? Well, because we need public health as a partner if we want to really get serious about community and population health. In exchange for our doing that, they are giving our faculty the opportunity at the rate of 1, sometimes 2 a year, waived tuition to get an MPH degree. So they are creating amongst our own faculty in the School of Public Health, MPH faculty. So we're pulling ourselves together as 2 respective schools as a way to augment community health. Now we didn't get very far. Well, let me tell you about one more. The MSA projects, the mentored scholarly activity projects that medical students do. 2040 took on some of those. We didn't plan on this. This just happened. It just worked out that there were students who wanted to do community projects as part of their scholarly activity. And we had somebody, Janet Meredith, who was really good at finding the kinds of projects in communities that the community itself wanted, that students were willing to do, that we could supervise and mentor in such a way that they got credit for mentored scholarly activity. And so I think we're 60 or 80 students to the good on these things now, and they rate these as among the most highly evaluated programs that they do. There are a number of other things like that, but here's where this one is. We have failed at getting a comprehensive Institute for Community and Population Health Infrastructure grant. We didn't succeed at that. We've still got some work to do there. Here's where I sit. I'm looking at community health as part of primary care. And in order to pull the threads, in order to have the substrate, in order to have the programs, it's going to take 2040, Partner for Health, drain on the budget. It's going to take community campus partnership. Oh man, we've got to do these programs that don't quite fit with what family medicine wants to do. It's going to take administering School of Public Health residency programs. Oh man, why are we staffing these things? These kinds of efforts have a cost. They have a cost, and we feel that cost because we can't do other things because of that. And yet there's a value that it's incumbent on me as the chair of this department to protect, until it becomes obvious that this is not a good idea. And this is one of those things we tried and failed. That happens with some things. It's not going to happen with this one, but it does happen. So that's a really important part of how that long vision works. Now, the third thing I said was hire the right people, give them what they need, and get out of their way. You find people who have talent, who share your values and priorities, who are selfless, who are honest, who are a team player. Find the people who can do the job or who can learn to do the job and hire them. And sometimes just find somebody who's really good and hire them. Figure out what the job is later. Sometimes that's really the best thing to do. I have a long list here. I'm not going to read all of these names. We have a long list of really outstanding people that we have recruited to this place in the last 20 years. A lot of them are in this room right now, who I'm proud to be the chair on their watch. I'm proud that these are the kinds of hires that we made. It's as hard as anything to stay out of their way and let them make their own mistakes instead of making my mistakes. But it's really beautiful to see the people that we've hired and what they have produced, mostly by staying out of their way. Shaping the culture. I'm going to just a culture it's beliefs and behaviors and opinions and customs and attitudes that characterize a group of people. We have a culture as a department. We have a culture in a residency program. General culture is the one that you grow up in. It's colored by your family and your region and so forth, and it's hard to change that very much. I mean, you can do it. You can overcome some of the ways that you grew up, but that's a lot of tacits in there. A local culture or a work culture is different. It's much more accessible. You can create a cockpit in a cockpit of an airliner or on a SEAL team or in a department. You can create a local culture by incenting, by messaging, by signaling, by repeating certain behaviors, by modeling. There are ways that you can create a culture. And I think it is one of the most important things. I watch this all the time, everywhere I go, every meeting I'm in. I try to watch my own mouth and my own behavior and model it, and I listen for it. And when I think when we're not comporting with a culture that's likely to lead us to that pole star, I have to respond in some way. Here's some of the messages that go with that. Remember why we're here, to help people become a little healthier. Expect problems. Welcome them as a sign that we're alive. Speak up, speak the truth, and have no fear. I told my kids that when they were little kids, and I lived to regret it. Be kind. Kindness trumps cleverness every time. Try something, anything, then fine-tune it. Life is a beta test. Listen closely to what people say and how they say it. Listen closely. Don't just be quiet while you're thinking of the next thing that you're going to say. Write down the best of it. Be cold and objective in judging whether it works. In the world of actual things, nothing works perfectly and nothing works forever. Don't let little problems persist. Small nagging problems corrode morale. Fix them. The hard stuff we do right away. It's the impossible stuff that takes a little time. Bite off more than you can chew. Then offer some of it to your neighbor. Conflict is good. Not war, conflict. It actually brings people together. Let yourself be disturbed, but not abused. A lot of the time, you're just wrong. It's a sign of taking a position. Own it. Set things right before they arise. Set things right before they arise. Anticipate problems. Have a long horizon. Unless we go to extremes, we'll never get anywhere. Tackle hard problems and try radical solutions. Solve hard. Expect surprises. That's not an oxymoron. Sometimes the answers lie outside our world, and you really have to be more than you are in order to get an answer. Get in the mix. Let your partners disturb your ideas. Too much time behind a closed door is bad. You're the best person to do certain jobs. Do those jobs. Do what nobody but you can do. Be stable but flexible. That's not an oxymoron. Yes, you're a kid in a candy store. Learn things, try stuff, enjoy yourself. But remember, candy is not one of the basic food groups. We've got work to do around here. Plan, but be spontaneous. That's not an oxymoron. Respect your partners and celebrate their successes. Ask this question. Does it make our patients healthier? Never stop thinking about how to do it better. And then I told you about mentoring. I spend about 10 hours a week mentoring, and it is the joy of my life right now. There are people who are smarter and more brave and more and know things that I don't know, that make me feel like the world is in good hands. They just need to know a few things about how it works. There's a few things that if I can offer, they're even better than they are, and they're surely better than I am. Okay, that's it. Didn't leave you much time for questions, did I? I'm going to sit here and let you ask some, but I understand if you have to leave.
Frank, you got through that without mentioning behavioral health. What's up?
Behavioral health is probably the most important of those things that I brought here, sure that the city on the hill required that we master integrating behavioral health into primary care as a feature of our comprehensiveness and as the only way that we can properly serve our patients. I thought that was just too easy. I've burned so many calories thinking about that. I thought you might actually be bored listening to me talk about behavioral health. It's all I talk about anyway. So I chose some that were a little bit less well-formed.
Thank you, Frank. That was wonderful and a lot to digest. So I guess my main question is, I want to tap into your powers of prediction, or at least visualization kind of the future, to ask if you could share some of your thoughts about I guess sort of like a mini SWOT analysis, strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats for what your successor will have on the horizon to deal with, or what we should be thinking about as a group as we consider this evolution and this transition.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm encouraged that that this difficult, Procrustean, multi-specialty academic health center that we work in is actually pretty soft to family medicine and primary care. And that compared to, I've done consultations at 40 departments of family medicine by now. We've got it so good. It's pretty soft here. I think that the value of primary care is more widely understood and appreciated here than it is at many places. I think that's a risk. It's much easier to fly under the radar as a small, nimble, effective program. But if you want a foundation for your entire healthcare system that's based on good primary care, you cannot do that under the radar. You have to do it with hospital systems and practice plans that have different priorities, different ways of doing things, different time horizons, and different senses of who should be in front of the parade. So one of the things that's very interesting right now is Colleen moves into a much larger role around trying to roll out primary care for the system as a whole. She's running into people who think they know what they're doing. So it's a mixed blessing. It's a mixed blessing. So I think we're likely to continue to have difficulties shaping primary care and shaping family medicine to our vision, speaking that vision clearly and repeatedly. There's no substitute for that. People after the 7th time say, well, why didn't you say so? But so I think we're going to have some trouble with that, and we're going to have some sparks fly. But I actually am very encouraged that we have new leadership at the hospital system level, at the university hospital level, at the children's hospital level, and at the School of Medicine level. And all of them kind of get us better than I had any right to expect. We've got a good dean right now. He is not a primary care guy, but he gets it. He's easy for me to work with. He tells the truth. He's not afraid to say what he thinks, and he does what he says he's going to do. And he's been very good to us so far. So I think we'll probably have a pretty good go of it that way. Now, I just described a culture that I think the culture of complex adaptive systems and a way to operate in a service mentality as professionals, that is not necessarily what you're going to meet everywhere here. You can operate an OR or an emergency room after Frederick Taylor, not a Taylorism, assembly line. You can generate RVUs, you can pour patients out your workflow, you can standardize things. Primary care does not work like that. The fundamental work in primary care is the creative act of producing an individual personal care plan. That takes work, and you cannot do that in an assembly line fashion. So we're going to have a big culture clash in trying to get primary care right in this system. But basically, it looks pretty good to me.
Hi, Frank. I have a question. Do you think it will be easy to find the right fit for the next chair for this department? If the answer to that is no, then what is it about our department that distinguishes it in a way that will make it very hard to find the right fit?
Well, thank you, David. That's a really good question. I think this is likely to be a search that succeeds. This is a very attractive department. I get unsolicited asks from people, including chairs of other departments of family medicine, if they can come to work here. People want to work here. It's an attractive department. Now, I'm a certain kind of leader. Before me, Larry Green was a certain kind of leader. We're both symbolic kind of leaders, vision, city on the hill. So that's a strength. And this department has been dominated by that kind of leadership for 35 years. It is not necessary that we have that kind of leader. What I have done in order to compensate for the fact that I'm not as well organized, or I don't like to look at your goddamn budgets, is organize around me, create a certain kind of complementarity in the leadership team so that it's complete. I'm incomplete as a leader. And so if someone comes here and they're like me as a leader by temperament, they inspire and they stand on the table and flap their arms and say, then that would be relatively easy transition in some ways. If someone comes here who is much more, let's say, structural as a leader, where they like strategic plans and they like to actually follow strategic plans, I am confident that our leadership team will conform around that, and the other resources that we need can be brought in to complement that in such a way that we won't lose anything, or I don't think we'll lose anything. I am not worried that this department needs another leader like me at all, at all. And like I said, I think if I were to disappear, if I get hit by a beer truck on the way to my car, it's going to look the same for a long time before anybody notices any difference. The place runs itself. I mean, I say that, you know what I mean by that. It runs itself because you're on the job, because all of y'all are on the job. It runs itself. So I think that's going to be okay. I don't think we have to worry in terms of selection criteria of finding someone with a particular kind of temperament. I think the values matter, the experience matters, the intelligence matters, values really matter. Somebody who is respectful, generous, works hard, honest, has a clear sense of where we're trying to go. I think this department could easily organize around that, no matter what their temperament is. Let's call it a day. Thank you all so much.